Hi, I'm John. I'm starting this ministry because I believe that spiritual energy is real. But I also believe that science is real and that the two of them should not be in conflict. I also believe that many of us have a very similar viewpoint, but just aren't sure what to make of it all. How many of us, I wonder, struggle with trying to reconcile all the things that we've been taught about questions like, does God exist? Do I have a soul? Is there an afterlife? Are heaven and hell real? With all of the things that we observe in the world every single day of our lives. For many of us, the answers to those questions have been hammered into our heads since we were children. If you were like me, you were probably taught that there was some supernatural guy in a toga out there who will just take care of everything as long as we believe hard enough. But there's so much more to it than just that. You know, one of the things that most people don't think about is that just as there is a relationship between the physical and the metaphysical, there is also a relationship between your psychology and your spirituality. Spirituality is far deeper and paradoxically much, much more complex and yet simple at the same time than is commonly believed. Come with me. Let's go on a journey together as we explore how in this modern world, with all that we know today, we can paint a much clearer picture about how the physical and the metaphysical universes work and how they work together. Let's talk about that. Come on, let's go. What I said a moment ago about psychology and spirituality, this is where the world over, the problems really start for a lot of people, because so many people all over the world are taught things early in life that are in conflict with each other, and that creates a problem. It's a problem that occurs when you try to get yourself to believe two things at the same time that are in conflict. Now, in psychological circles, they call this problem cognitive dissonance, which is really just kind of a fancy schmancy way of saying that you're arguing with yourself. What I'm trying to tell you here is that if you want some kind of meaningful spiritual satisfaction, your heart and your mind cannot be fighting. Now, let's go explore that. Come on. You know, when I was a kid, I saw this movie. It was called 1 Million Years BC. It was a pretty cheesy movie by today's standards, but as a kid, I absolutely loved it. You know why? Because it had dinosaurs in it. Just like this guy. Now, of course, when I was a kid, I loved dinosaurs. You know why? Because I was a kid, and all kids love dinosaurs. That's very normal. Now, the thing was, the school I was going to, they didn't try to tell me that guys like this weren't really real. I didn't run into problems like that until I went somewhere else. Follow me. That didn't really start to happen until I got to a place that was a lot like this. And I'll bet many, if not most of you, were taught a very different story about how it all began when you got to a Sunday school in a place that probably, well, looked a lot like this, where they started teaching you the story of creation and Adam and Eve, and how Eve was tempted by the serpent to eat the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And they probably didn't mention dinosaurs at all, and really didn't want you to believe the world is anywhere near as old as it actually is. Yet, at the same time, when they were teaching you that, the local public library here, not to mention PBS and all manner of pop culture, had all kinds of information out there about dinosaurs, verifying their reality. So apparently, what science was teaching us about dinosaurs was actually true. So what happens when the immovable object of one belief system comes into contact with the irresistible force of another? This is something's got to give. So what gives? Well, this creates a bit of a problem now, doesn't it? Because I bet many of you, just like I was, are or were being taught two separate things that are incompatible with each other. This is where cognitive dissonance, that arguing with yourself, this is where that comes from. And I believe that this is the root problem of all sorts of problems that we are having all over the entire world. Being indoctrinated into a religious belief system when we are way too young to be able to think for ourselves is fertile breeding ground for cognitive dissonance. At an age when people are not yet able to think for themselves, they are being taught things that are nothing more than mythology, as if they are genuine fact. So what chance does a kid have in an atmosphere like that? So what happens when you get older? What happens when you start asking the questions they didn't want you to ask when you were a child? What happens when you start reading the books you want to read and watching the things you want to watch and learning the things you want to learn? What happens when you don't believe in Santa anymore? Well, that's a real problem now, isn't it? Because that means that you have probably decided that you're going to face your own cognitive dissonance. That means that you've probably decided that those dinosaur fossils you saw in a museum were actually real, and that maybe some of what the church has taught you should be called into question. I was once taught that the fossils that I saw in a museum were put there by Satan in an effort to fool me so that he could steal my soul. So what happens when you no longer believe that those fossils in the museum were put there by Satan trying to fool you? This is the barrier that most people face. The spirituality that served you as a child may not serve you very well as an adult at all. Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, all of those things, they served us well as children, but they do nothing for us as adults, so we don't believe in them anymore. As far as they are concerned, we have resolved our cognitive dissonance. Now, if we can do that with Kris Kringle, why can't we do it with the childhood religion that we were taught, whose primary purpose is to keep us children? Cognitive dissonance is simply a disorder that can be resolved quite easily by simply choosing, making a choice. The bottom line is this: if you're trying to believe in two things that are incompatible, well, one of them's got to go. So how do you choose? Well, I know that it's sometimes been underrated, but every now and then you can just rely on good old-fashioned common sense. My shy little buddy down here, he's an albino corn snake. They actually call him Colonel. He's a constrictor. He likes to squeeze around things until he can squeeze the life out of them, and then he eats them. He can also molt. He can hide in all kinds of little places. There's a lot of things that this little guy can do. The one thing he can't do? Talk. But here, and I suspect many of you, were taught that our very salvation depends on believing that a snake could talk. You know the story. Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden, all of that stuff. The talking snake convinced the lady to eat the piece of fruit from the magic tree, and it made God so angry that he decided to damn everyone that has not yet been born, which works out to basically all of humanity. Well, the problem is I've never encountered a snake that can talk. And I know for an absolute fact that no one else has either. I would be willing to go so far as to declare it a law of existence that no snake at any time could ever speak a human language. But I was also taught that there was one very big exception right at the very beginning. And it conflicts with every observation I have made about any snake I have ever seen. And it does for you too. So, what does this tell us about cognitive dissonance? Well, a couple of things, really. One is that you probably can't experience real spiritual growth if you are torn between two roads, if you're still busy arguing with yourself. The way out of that problem, out of that particular conundrum, is you got to choose. Something's not working, and something's got to go. And the other is that you can rely on your own common sense and good judgment to help you make these decisions. For me, it came down to the simple fact that I'd seen fossils with my own eyes, but I'd never once seen a talking snake. Your objectivity can be your guide. You simply have to have the courage to reject that which you know cannot be true. Even though maybe somebody that loves you very dearly and you love is trying to persuade you to their belief system. The problem with that is they are really just trying to protect their own comfort. And you cannot make decisions about your own spiritual growth based on protecting someone else's own comfort. You've grown up. Maybe it's time that you give up the God of childhood and replace it with a much more adult model. And that's a discussion for another time. If you find that you're getting anything out of this, please subscribe. Until then, I'll talk to you next time.